Today's episode of the FUMS Podcast Show is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/FUMS. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Go get your free audiobook at audibletrial.com/FUMS. Welcome to the FUMS Now Podcast Show, where you'll gain information, inspiration, and motivation for living your best life with multiple sclerosis. Find us online at FUMSnow.com. I'm your host, Kathy Reagan Young. Today's guest is Ivy Larson, wife, mother, 5-time book author, and former MS sufferer. I say it like that because she seems to have found the sweet spot in tweaking her diet and exercise to not have taken any MS meds or had any MS flares or progression in over 20 years. It's a pretty amazing and inspiring story, and she's brought a gift for the FUMS community as well. Let's go meet her. Hi, Ivy. Thanks so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to dive in.
Me too. You've done some really amazing things in this life, including your latest cookbook that we'll be talking about today, along with a little gift to the FUMS community. So hang on, everybody. You'll want to hear about this. You've done all this despite your MS diagnosis. If you would, please, could you just share your DX story with us?
Oh, sure. Well, it's been 20 years since I was diagnosed. I'm 43 years old now. And it really started, I was actually in the middle of the movie The Horse Whisperer, and that was in the summer, and I'd been getting reoccurring bladder infections, like 3 over the course of 1 month. And I was going to the natural food store, and they told me to take cranberry juice, and so I had drank a huge, like 16 ounces of cranberry juice. And, which I now know I would not do with all that sugar. But I was sitting in the Horse Whisperer movie when all of a sudden I felt like I had to go to the bathroom. I got up and went and could not go a single drop. And I can't even tell you how terrifying it was. And actually, I just rewatched The Horse Whisperer for the first time in 20 years.
Oh my gosh.
And I realized, it's not a coincidence that that's the movie I got sick in. And even just connecting with the horse, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie, but the horse had a horrific accident. And just the terror that shot through the horse after the accident was the same terror I know that I felt, because I knew something. I didn't know MS, but I knew something was terribly wrong.
Oh my gosh, was it like PTSD watching that movie again?
It honestly was. I mean, I can't even tell you. I'm actually in the middle of writing a huge blog post about it, because it helped me piece together the fact that you needed to have love and hope. Those were the 2 things that I had in the beginning that really were instrumental in my recovery. Because I would say I'm not cured, but I have recovered, or at least for now, I've recovered.
Right.
And so, there's a huge emotional component, I believe, that is involved in MS. I think, it's important to say that things weren't going hunky-dory at the time I was diagnosed. I was having emotional strains and turbulence in my life, and anxiety, and I had depression episodes. So it wasn't like all of a sudden I was just, totally healthy. I mean, I looked healthy, and I was 22, but there was something going on. Mm-hmm. And anyway, so at that time, so I didn't know what to do. We didn't even have cell phones. Mm-hmm. I remember calling my parents from a payphone, and they said, "Well, just meet us at the emergency room." We went to the emergency room, and the doctor, after doing some tests and whatnot, they determined I wasn't having a stroke, and it had to be neurological. It wasn't prostate issue. So there's a few things you can kind of rule out when a young woman can't void like that. Right. Mm-hmm. So he knew right away, the emergency room doctor, that it was neurological. And so he sent me to the University of Miami. First, I went to the urologist there, and then I went to Dr. William Shermata, who's the neurologist. Mm-hmm. And he's since deceased, but he was a world-renowned MS specialist who had written something like 60 peer-reviewed papers, which is a very impressive amount for an academic. He was a full professor. And he told me, pretty much straight up with it, like we did the MRI. I had it that night. I was still wearing a catheter. They left a catheter in for a week. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that was necessary, but that was traumatic in and of itself. And so he told me I was in the early stages of the disease and that I pretty much had 3 options. I could begin one of the disease-modifying medicines, but they were contraindicated during pregnancy, and they could potentially exacerbate the depression that I had already experienced, which I had a major depression episode in high school. But it had recovered, but then it sort of morphed into anxiety. And they say depression and anxiety are like kissing,
No joke. Yep.
And then I think that your MS changes your brain in a way that causes those issues, even if you have nothing to be depressed or anxious about. Mm-hmm. So he had explained to me that the medicines were, the fact that they were contraindicated during pregnancy and could potentially exacerbate the depression, that made me nervous. Then he said the second option was to begin with trial medicine. But that also made me nervous because I didn't want to be a guinea pig. Mm-hmm. And the third option was to try the Swank Diet. And are you familiar with the Swank Diet?
I am, but for those that aren't, go ahead and talk about that a little bit.
The Swank Diet, so the Swank Diet was developed by Dr. Roy Swank. He was a neurologist who did his research in the 50s, and this was before disease-modifying medicines were available. So there weren't options really to treat MS other than tell people to go home and go to bed, which we now know is the worst advice ever. But anyway, so Dr. Swank went on a sabbatical to Norway, and he made the observation that the people who lived inland, who ate a higher rate of, or much significantly higher intake of animal-based saturated fat, had a statistically significantly increased risk of MS compared to the people of the same population, same genetics and whatnot, who lived on the coast, who ate predominantly fish. And back then, it wasn't, the shipping availability of food around the world wasn't as prevalent as it is today. So you pretty much ate more where you lived,
right.
More local. Mm-hmm. And so based on that observation alone, he came up with what is called the Swank Diet, which has been published in peer-reviewed journals. It's in Lancet, New England Journal of Medicine. It's been in multiple peer-reviewed journals. And he followed patients. He recommended that basically the whole diet was to limit your intake of animal-based saturated fat to no more than 15 grams a day. And at that point, trans fats were not an issue, and really all the processed foods and as much sugar as we have and whatnot now wasn't such a factor back then. Right. But he didn't address trans fats or processed foods. But he did say unlimited amounts of fruits and vegetables, pretty much limiting, your intake of animal-based saturated fat. And if you're eating a lot of animal foods, it's very quick to go up to the 15-gram mark in a day.
Right.
You're just eating a steak, 6 ounces of steak. You've got a lot of saturated fat right there. And so anyway, Dr. Swank followed his patients for 5 years and then up to 20 years, which is really unusual for an academic nutrition study to follow them for that long term. And the patients who followed at the end of the 20-year mark, the patients who followed the diet were better off than at the time they were diagnosed with MS, compared to the patients who didn't follow the diet, who had the typical progression of MS. And so Dr. Sharamata, my neurologist, told me about this study and about the diet, but of course he didn't have all day to explain in detail about it. So he told me about the book, and he said it would, because I was in the early stages of the disease and because I was so young, it was very reasonable to start with the diet and lifestyle modification, which was also heavily emphasized the importance of managing stress. He emphasized stress management pretty much equally as much as he emphasized the diet and exercise, but not over exercise. It was like at that point I had an American College of Sports Medicine certification. So I was an exercise specialist. I was actually working in the same hospital where I was ended up in the emergency room.
Oh, that's crazy.
Working as an exercise specialist there. And so anyway, I did not, I was 22. I didn't know, this is 1998. I didn't know anything about diet or nutrition. And the fact that they say a diet could control a condition like MS and I can't go to the bathroom. I mean, it was hard for me to wrap my hands around.
Yeah, that's a lot of dots to connect there.
Yeah, how that could even be possible.
Right.
And so I, of course, purchased the Swank book right away, but it was not an easy read. And because it was so outdated, it didn't have a lot of relevancy for today. Plus, it wasn't addressing the trans fats, which I didn't even know was an issue at that point. But looking back, it wasn't addressing that. So anyway, but I called my now husband, who's a surgeon. And I knew my husband, Andy, now from when I was 13 in high school. He was assigned to be my math tutor when I was 13. So he was
cute.
So we never actually dated in high school, but we just had a really strong connection. And anyway, so he was
bonded over math. Finally, something I find good about math.
Yeah, that's the only good thing about math.
Amen.
And so anyway, he was in medical school at the University of Pennsylvania. And I called to ask him if he could just research this diet and also my neurologist, just to make sure he was up to snuff too.
Yeah.
And he came back. We spent a full day in the library there because the internet the availability of the internet was just in its infancy. And he came back and said after the day that, yes, there is legitimate research in mainstream medical journals. And at this point, my husband was not open to alternative or holistic therapies. University of Pennsylvania is one of the top 3, consistently ranked one of the top 3 medical schools in the country. But it does not address nutrition. There were about 15 hours of nutrition or 20 hours. And it was
right. Especially back in the day. I mean, that just wasn't right. There was they didn't draw the correlation at that point. No. It's kind of outside the norm.
Yeah, definitely. And that was the thing. It was, he had gone through his neurology rotation and not a mention, not even a question about diet. So, and, this was and he had been into weightlifting and working out and he had read so many conflicting, how boys, when they're trying to work out, start reading all the nutrition stuff. And he had read from high school and college, so many conflicting opinions about the best diet that he just said, nobody knows. It doesn't make a difference. So I'll just eat whatever I want and work out. That was basically his conclusion. And so now he's reading this thing about, the MS. And so anyway, it was really my husband's encouragement. I believed Dr. Sharamata. I just needed a backup before I was going to commit.
Right. Absolutely. Somebody trusted. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I dove after Andy said it was definitely worth trying. I pretty much just dove right in and I changed my diet. I mean, overnight, basically. I was terrified. I think, and also, I think there's a blessing in having been so young because I wasn't set in my ways. I'm a junk food lover, and my nickname was Garbage Can in high school because I ate so much junk. But I was not. It's different. It would be really different now, and I know psychologically at 42 because I have a routine and I cook a certain way for my. I buy a certain amount of food, but I wasn't even buying my own food back then.
Yeah.
So it was
so young.
It wasn't in many ways it was a blessing. It was hard. It was difficult being diagnosed that young, but also a blessing in another way.
Right. Yeah. Good way to look at it.
Good and bad.
Yeah. Right. So I read in your bio that when you were deciding whether to go the traditional farmer route or try dietary changes, you thought, well, the dietary change wouldn't have any negative side effects. And if the need arose, I can always add the medication later. Right. So
yes.
I would think that's an approach many people may start from when considering taking a dietary approach, right? Sort of, what have I got to lose?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the thing with the diet is, first of all, the diet that we recommend is an anti-inflammatory, anti-aging diet, really. And so
now we're talking.
Yeah.
Can I go backward or am I just starting where I am?
I know, right? But that's the thing. If you think about aging, and MS is really a disease, a degenerative disease. It happens with age. Usually it's very unusual that it happened at 22. Well, not as unusual these days, probably because of the stress. Mm-hmm. But the thing is if you can control, well, it works in multiple ways, but reducing inflammation reduces the body's ability to attack itself, and that of course protects the myelin sheath and whatnot. But in addition, it slows the aging process, and so anything that slows the aging process and slows systemic stress on your body is also going to be beneficial for MS. And you can sort of think of it, even though it's not going to be the cure, you can delay onset. And and who knows, until there is a cure. That was sort of, to be honest, when I first started, because Dr. Sherman had told me in 10 years, this was in 1998, that there will be a cure for MS. That was what he told me. And I kind of held on to that belief that I just have to do this for 10 years or less. Right. And I now realize that's, even if I didn't have MS, I would still do the diet because it would affect the way I feel, the way I age. I mean, I'm looking at my friends who didn't have MS and were totally healthy at 22 and continued to just eat and do whatever, live how you would live at 22, carefree and whatnot. And they are starting to have real issues right now. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I wouldn't change, even if a cure for MS comes about, I would not change what I do now for anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that makes sense. So what about those folks who are already on a disease modifying drug and maybe would just like to try the anti-inflammatory diet? Do you suggest that as well? This isn't just for people who are looking to ditch their drugs. This is anybody. Got it. Okay.
In conjunction. This has absolutely, whether you take the medicine or not, this is it's like having diabetes or heart disease. If you take a statin, if you have heart disease and you take a statin drug, that doesn't give you a free ticket to go out and eat cheeseburgers, French fries, and pizza.
Which sucks, by the way, because wouldn't it be great if it did?
Trust me, I totally agree.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I mean, if you don't, the medicine isn't a free ticket or a free ride to just do whatever. I mean, it's a tool. It's a tool.
Yeah.
And the way I view MS, utilizing as many tools as possible is the best way for me to approach managing the disease.
Right. Well, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So your bio said that you have been MS symptom and medication free for over 20 years. I mean, that is amazing. What were some of the first things that you noticed improving when you started this diet, and how long did it take before you noticed improvement?
I guess I also forgot to say I was having big bladder urgency and frequency issues. So I was going to the bathroom every 15 to 20 minutes, waking up in the night, 7 times a night to go to the bathroom, and then getting all those bladder infections. Part of the reason I was getting the bladder infections was because my bladder wasn't emptying, which we found out after doing this video urodynamics test. And then I lost, my right leg became numb and tingly. I lost a lot of strength in my right hip flexor. So I was definitely not in good shape when I was diagnosed. But that big episode was where I couldn't go, couldn't void. Yeah. And so anyway, so slowly but surely, the first thing I noticed, and overwhelming fatigue. I had just fatigue beyond, repair.
Yeah. Everybody understands that one for sure. We all feel that one.
Functionable fatigue. And so I would say probably the first thing that I started to notice was the fatigue, the mood, the anxiety. I was really, by the time I was diagnosed with MS, it had morphed from depression to anxiety. And so I was really more anxious at that stage than depressed.
Yeah.
But, I would say my overall mental state and emotional state was stabilized rather quickly, especially considering the situation. I noticed, and then the bladder urgency and frequency, that just started to go away almost, really quickly. And then I just started to slowly get better. I started doing rehab. I was exercising, but my hip flexor, for whatever reason, it had affected my right hip flexor. And so I started just focusing on exercise for that. And Yeah. And I don't have an exact time frame, but
pretty quickly.
Yes, pretty quickly.
I noticed it.
I think
cool.
Just feeling better from the diet. I mean, even if you don't have MS, I mean, if you go from eating junk to healthy foods, that just in and of itself, you're going to have more energy.
Overall, right.
Yeah, like not eating a lot of, animal-based saturated fats, that which are weigh you down and drain your energy and are difficult to digest. So you start eating more fruits and vegetables and whole grains and nuts and seeds and fish, and all of a sudden, like, these foods are easy to digest and they're giving you so much nutrient bang for a relatively low amount of calories, and so your energy and digestion and everything just starts to improve. So I think even if I didn't have MS, I would have felt better.
Yeah. Well, that all makes sense. But we talked about this a little before I pushed record. But was it hard? I am such a junk food junkie, and I even find comfort in it. It's really weird. Yeah, like when I'm upset or sad about something, my go-to, I shouldn't even be admitting this, but in transparency, like thinking about getting some kind of junk food, particularly chocolate, and like curling up, with some stupid TV show where I just check out mentally and just shove this crap in my face. It's just comforting to me. It's ridiculous. I know it's bad.
No, but
so that sounds like this would be really hard. Can I tiptoe into this, or do I have to go all in?
Yeah, no, I totally understand what you're saying. And actually, the fact that it is so difficult and you don't want to create more stress. I mean, everybody is an individual. Everybody has a unique personality and a unique way of, viewing the world and viewing themselves and whatnot. And for me, the right approach was to go right in. And I'll say the reason why is because I couldn't handle the disability. I just couldn't.
Right.
So for me, the only option was to get better. And I think my mindset had a huge role. I mean, I made up my mind. I just was going to get better because I couldn't exist like that.
Sure. And at 22, like you mentioned earlier, you weren't even cooking for yourself, much less anybody else. I've been cooking for these people that are living with me, that I also call my children and my husband, for years and years and years. So we're really set in this, and so I did admit that my junk food junkieism, but I also want to get it out there that I cook every day and I cook good, well-balanced meals. It's just I just still crave this junk food. So I eat well, but just not all the time. Okay.
I totally get it. And and the thing is that, so back to what you were saying about it, tiptoeing into it, because that you absolutely can. And for certain personalities, I would really recommend that that's what they do so that you don't cause more stress.
Right.
and
exactly.
overwhelm yourself even more. And as far as the cravings, I'll just touch on those two real quick because I definitely did battle that. I battled sugar was my main issue, to be honest. And I battled that for years. And it was really only when I started adding more fruit that my sugar, I actually wrote an article on the blog on that about my number one tip for reducing sugar cravings. And it was really by adding more fruit. That was the only way that I finally got a handle on my sugar cravings, because I wasn't eating sugar, but I was still craving sugar. So that cravings are like torture.
Oh, they really are. I'm going to, just to let everybody know, I'm going to go ahead and I will link to that article that you just referenced, because that sounds like something we could all use. Those of us who crave sugar.
Yeah, that was a big thing. And then the other thing that really helped with my cravings was focusing more on nutrient density. And I'm huge on that. So making my food count nutritionally. I don't count calories or carbs or, fat grams, other than I do limit my animal-based saturated fat. But focusing on getting more nutrient dense foods is huge for reducing food cravings.
Okay, good to know. So the catchphrase is kind of clean eating, but what the heck does that mean? What makes it clean? And like, am I eating dirty?
Oh, okay. So clean, everybody has a different definition of clean.
Okay. What's yours?
I mean, mine is food that's based on it's an anti-inflammatory diet based on whole foods in their natural, most nutrient dense state. And a very high emphasis on plant foods, whole whole food plant foods.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah, like not when I say plant foods, not just pasta and popcorn and that sort of thing, but plant foods by fruits and vegetables, nuts, seeds, whole grains, unrefined plant foods.
Got it.
And
then don't dump a whole bunch of sauce on it.
Yeah. Get a bunch of cheese whiz and
right, exactly.
But yeah, that is my definition, and it's not a vegan diet, but it leans heavily towards vegan.
Okay.
And very plant rich and whole foods based in wide variety, and a huge emphasis on eating more fruits and vegetables. That's key.
That's the thing. Okay. Well, you talk about cell regeneration. That's so interesting. What is it, and what does it have to do with MS, and how does clean eating support that?
That is really important question, because I think if people, first of all, if you believe that you can, and there's science that shows you can heal, you are so much more motivated and hopeful, and it's just a different psychology that you're going into battling the disease with. And your thoughts affect your emotions, and your emotions affect everything about how your body handles stress and your immune system and whatnot. So first of all, knowing that you can heal is one thing, but cell regeneration pretty much applies to your body's natural ability to repair damaged cells. So if you think about it, if you break a bone or you cut yourself, you can heal. Your body has mechanisms in place that it can heal. And so with MS, the disease tricks your body into attacking and damaging its own myelin nerve coatings, and then in the brain rendering the nerves less efficient and eventually useless. And then people think, oh, well, that's it, they're damaged. But actually modern research has proven otherwise. The process is actually reversible. And the same diet, the anti-inflammatory diet that reduces inflammation, also makes your body less likely to attack itself, but it also promotes the natural healing process that causes cells in your body that are similar to stem cells to differentiate into oligodendrocyte cells. And those are capable of repairing the myelin sheath. And so the process of creating new functional cells is called cell regeneration. And it helps explain how MS patients can recover full function even after a significantly serious attack. So I think it's really important that patients know that, so that there's hope, and it totally changes your perspective on managing the disease if you believe that there's hope that you can get better.
Right. And there's, I remember feeling this, I'm trying to think of how to describe it. It was a lack of control. This doctor tells me I have MS, and here are the drugs. And I just felt like my body had betrayed me, and I had such a lack of control. This was just going to be happening to me the rest of my life. So I think there's a lot to be said for feeling some semblance of control.
Oh, my
And if you feel like you can, with something like diet, manipulate this disease and quiet it, I would think that would give you a sense of control. That would, and as you referenced, what kind of is going on in your head is affecting your body. So this makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, it really is. I don't think people realize how much their thoughts affect their emotions, and how much their emotions affect their body. I don't think that's drilled in. I think doctors say manage stress. That's so important. They'll tell I think pretty much every neurologist will tell MS patients to manage stress, but then they don't tell you really what to do.
Yeah. What does that mean?
What's that mean? And in so many ways, for me, managing stress is the thing that took me a long time to really get a handle on, and I'm still working on it. But the diet for me was easier for some reason, because it was more concrete. Just eat this, not that,
Yeah, right.
And that was more doable. But the stress part really is equally, or if not, I would say if not even more so important. But I believe you have, when going back to the movie The Horse Whisperer, I I believe in the movie, the girl had lost hope initially, but it was only when she started to get to have hope, because she had lost her leg. And then she started to and you can't regain your leg. So obviously but she started to have hope that she could have a life. And that was when she started to really recover. And I was thinking about the similarity in the movie between, the accident and the loss of hope. And she had love. She had tremendous love. And I know not everybody has love and support, which is
sure.
But you can love yourself. That's what you can start by loving yourself and having hope and just knowing that it's possible to get better. I really think totally changes the outcome of everything. I really believe that. And I think about, I'll just throw this in there. The book started, my first boyfriend in high school also was diagnosed with MS. And later,
my gosh, how crazy is that?
And later my best girlfriend was diagnosed.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And he, his name was AJ. I don't want to cry. He went blind in his eye when he was my son's age, at 18. And, but they didn't diagnose it with MS at first. They just said optic neuritis. Anyway, then I was diagnosed, or then he got officially diagnosed. Then I got diagnosed. And his neurologist, by the time I was diagnosed, his neurologist already had him on the disease modifying medicine, and he was straight up doing just the medical route. He had stabilized, but he wasn't doing great. And my doctor told me about the diet, but I'm Ivy from high school, and
right.
What I know. So I'm like handwriting all these diet notes and new recipes and, supplements to take and mailing them, because we weren't really even using email back then.
Yeah.
So I'm like snail mailing them back to him. And he took all my notes one day to the neurologist, and the neurologist put them, like pretty much crumpled them all up and said, this is just a complete waste of time. And so, so AJ came back and said, I'll he said, if you write a book and you get it published, then I'll follow your plan. So that was kind of like saying, if you build a spaceship, right, the moon with you. Especially back then, I didn't know how to type. I was a new mom. My husband's working over 100 hours a week as a resident. We shared a car. We had no money. I was unemployed. Like, write a book. That just seemed like, how do I start building the spaceship? I mean, how am I going to even do that? So it took me 5 years to finish the first book, because I didn't know how to do anything.
Right.
And, but then we couldn't get anybody interested, no publisher, because we weren't, we didn't have a national platform, and what TV show are we on, and what radio show, and my husband wasn't even an officially in practice surgeon at the time. He was still in residency. So so finally we had one publisher interested from Health Communications. But they said that the only way they'd be interested is if I could get 50 people on the program that we were recommending, and they with all these different conditions, because by this time we had said it wasn't just for MS. While we were doing the research, initially the book was just going to be for MS, but then it was like, gosh, it's for asthma, it's for arthritis, it's for allergies, it's for obesity and type 2 diabetes and heart disease. So we wanted to include 10 different, we just chose the number 10 different diseases. And so they said, if you can get all these people together and everybody can, or at least a good deal of them can see results, then the book can be published. So my husband came up with 5 weeks, and it's a long story how he came up with that, because it was based on a study that was in JAMA that showed after 4 weeks that you could significantly improve your blood ratio profile for cholesterol and whatnot. So he knew that your body could respond in 4 weeks. So we chose 5 just to be safe. Anyway, so on the phone with Nordic Naturals, the fish oil company that was donate the fish oil for the class. And my best friend called in like 3 times while I was on the phone. And she had called to say AJ had taken his life. He was 30. Yeah. So.
I'm so sorry.
It was a devastating loss for me.
Yeah.
On many levels. But anyway, so that's one story. The good thing is he actually, I don't know if you're spiritual at all, but he came to my husband and I in a sign in February, which was after almost 13 years. So the good news is I know his spirit is still alive. I know that sounds crazy, and it's a whole nother story. I can't really explain that one, but he did. There was a sign. There was no question. It happened at the exact same time. So I'm pretty sure that was a sign. Well, I know it was.
Awesome.
So that's the good news.
Yeah.
But, and the books it's been 5 books now. None of the books would have existed without him. So
yeah. He threw down the gauntlet, gave you a little challenge there. Yeah. And now you've got 5 books out. That's awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, but the thing is that so when I'm writing this, I told you I was writing this big blog post that kind of ties everything together. And the thing is and I'm watching the Horse Whisperer movie and piecing it all together. And the thing is, he had love from his family, from all of his friends. He was super popular, so many friends, but he was missing a key component ingredient that I was missing, and that was hope.
Yeah.
And that's why knowing that the cells can regenerate, knowing that there's hope, I think that is one of the most important things to battling the disease. And I don't think neurologists and mainstream medicine offers enough of it, because I think there's a lot of issues with how medicine is operated right now. And I think they give the medicines, they don't have time to go into it. They don't even read the studies on nutrition. They don't, hear about it in medical school. And when you see how hard surgeons and doctors work, I don't blame them, because they run out of time to learn more stuff. It is hard, seriously hard work being a doctor.
Yes.
And so I don't want to blame them, because how can you know everything and you can't recommend, if you just don't know it, how you can't recommend it, so and they just don't have the opportunity, and they're not educated that way. But it's doing a disservice to the MS patients, because I think a lot of them feel they don't have hope.
Right. And so you're trying to right that wrong, which I appreciate.
There is hope.
I appreciate that.
Hope is a key ingredient.
It is. So you figured out the clean eating component of a healthy lifestyle, and then you added fitness and you developed a fitness regime that can be done in 30 minutes 3 times a week. That sounds pretty awesome. I know people are leaning in listening right now. So talk a little bit about the component of that lifestyle you advocate.
Yeah. So fitness has been a huge part of my life pretty much since I was 15. That's actually what helped me get over my big slump that I had in high school. Happened at 15. And the ironic thing is AJ, the friend that I was telling you about, is the one that helped me get out of that, which is part of why I had felt so terribly guilty over what happened. But anyway, so fitness has been a huge part of my lifestyle for decades. But obviously for MS, the managing or maintaining strength and flexibility for, spasticity and whatnot is so important. So I've modified, and then I had a congenital hip disorder, which actually was more, far worse for me personally than the MS, because I was disabled from it. I had to have a massive 7.5-hour surgery where my bone, this was done like 5 years ago. They had to go in and break my thigh bone in half.
Good Lord. That just made everything clench on my body. Oh,
yeah. It was a difficult surgery. And then they rotated the top part, because I had something called femoral retroversion. So they had to rotate the femoral head into the proper position and put a rod in my legs and screws in my hip and screws in my knee.
Oh, Lord.
Or above my knee. And so, anyway, so I had chronic hip pain for 10 years. I had it, the congenital issue started, the pain started after I had my son. After 18 years ago, but they didn't properly diagnose it. And anyway, so then I couldn't walk. I had a big complication where the bone didn't heal. So I couldn't walk for 6 months.
Oh my gosh.
And so during that time though, my exercise was limited, but I was still maintaining my strength by doing just, weightlifting and crunches and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I created the Full Fitness Fusion after that, as a way for a no impact exercise program that gets your heart rate up, but doesn't exhaust you. Cause that was the other issue with MS. Like I would notice if I went out for, let's say, an hour jog, I just didn't feel good. Like too much cardio. I have to balance my cardio with strength and flexibility. I can't do extreme endurance sports or extreme, heavy lifting or really extreme exercise of any sort. Because I can tell, like the way I judge for MS, the way I tell people if they have MS to how to know if they're exercising at the right intensity is when you're done with the workout, you should feel better than before you started and you should have more energy. And if you don't, I think for MS, you've pushed it too far because you really dial it back. Yeah, because you need an exercise creates oxidative stress, which depletes antioxidants and which is aging in and of itself if you're not replacing with the right nutrients. So that's another thing. Even your nutrients, instead of my old thought was that, if you exercise, you can eat whatever you want. It's actually not true. The more you exercise, the more you need to really be careful about what you're eating because the more antioxidants you need. You do need more calories, but if you want to slow the aging process, you also need more antioxidants. So the workout that I created is one that's going to keep you strong. It'll burn fat. It keeps your heart rate elevated. There's no impact. So if you have, balance issues and whatnot, although there are exercises that specifically target balance, because I think that's really important. If you do have balance issues, you don't want to just say, I have balance issues, now I'm not going to practice balance.
No more balance. Yeah.
So there's other ways that you can create new neural pathways by forcing your body to balance and do exercises that balance. And there's even imaging studies that show when you're balancing, doing a balance exercise, that so many different areas of your brain light up. So new pathways are being created. So I think that is important to incorporate. But anyway, so it's a 30-minute kind of short but intense, but not too intense workout that
three times a week, right?
Yes.
Okay. You have referenced hormone balance. Can you speak to that just a little bit? Why is that important in our MSers typically not hormonally balanced? And does clean eating address that as well?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So, like I mentioned earlier, I'm 43. And so I have definitely started to notice hormone issues after about the age of 40 is when I started to have them, mostly with migraines. Initially, they were thinking the migraines were MS related, but it turns out it was hormone related. And the thing with, not to my knowledge, MS patients are not more hormonally challenged. I don't know. I can't say that for certain, but I don't know of research that backs that up. So I don't think that's an issue. I think the issue is just pretty much where you have MS and you're also getting older. So now you've got a double whammy, and it's not uncommon for, women over 40 to have hormone issues as it is. But the thing is by balancing your hormones, you're reducing whole body stress. So that's just another way. It's another toolbox to reduce stress. And I think, if you have a hormonal imbalance, your body's under stress. Yeah. And if your body's under stress physically and emotionally, you're setting yourself up for another MS attack. So controlling the stress is key.
That makes sense. Well, you have a hormone smoothie recipe, and it spread like wildfire after your appearance on the Today Show talking about it. So let me just tell everybody that I will also link to that recipe. But can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, actually, it was syndicated on the Today Show. I don't know how. Yes, it was. It was a local one.
I see. Yeah, picked up.
Then it got picked up, but it was aired during Sweeps Week, and so somehow it got picked up and syndicated nationally and aired during the Today Show. I still don't know how that happened because I had friends whose parents live in Ohio. And they called and said, "You're on the Today Show." And I was like, I'm right
crazy.
Here.
Yeah, right. That's crazy.
I didn't even know that was going to happen. But anyway, so yes, the hormone smoothie I developed for myself. And then I shared it with my friend who's a news anchor here, Kelly Dunn on WPTV. And then she started it and had such great results that when the book came out, we were supposed to do the cookbook, the segment on the cookbook, but she wanted to do it on the hormone smoothie because it was getting such great results. So anyway, there's different ingredients that work. They're all plant food ingredients, and they work in different ways, but they also work synergistically. So for example, have you heard of maca?
Yes.
So that's an amazing, I guess you could call it a nutraceutical, and it's for not only for hormones, but also for insomnia, for boosting energy, as related to hormones for hot flashes, low libido, and also that would be related to hormones, but relevant to MS. It helps to combat anxiety and depression. And the thing, it's actually been consistently shown to help women and men with a wide variety of bothersome hormonal symptoms. So this is just a
powerhouse.
It's a powerhouse. It does a lot of stuff. So that's one of the ingredients. I mean, I won't go through every ingredient, but I'll just touch on a few. Another one is ashwagandha, and that's an adaptogen. That's super important for helping to control anxiety. But one of the ways it works is by lowering cortisol levels. And then by lowering the cortisol levels, it helps to mimic the calming neurotransmitter GABA. And GABA is what is actually released when you do yoga. So so ashwagandha is just it's an evidence-based treatment or remedy, you could call it, for anxiety, stress, insomnia. And it also has very potent anti-inflammatory benefits. So that's a second ingredient. Ground flax seeds. This is one that we were recommending. And we say the whole fat or the whole seed is better than the oil form, because you're always if you just take the oil of a food like flax oil, then you're getting just the oil benefits, whatever those might be, the omega-3s and flaxseed instance. But you're missing out on so many phytonutrients and phytoestrogens and fiber and other antioxidants that would be found in the whole food. So for flax seeds, I call it the whole fat. Flax seeds actually are incredibly beneficial for balancing hormones in both women and men. There's one study that showed eating just 2 tablespoons of flax seeds twice a day for 6 weeks reduced hot flashes by something like, I think it was like 57 or 60%.
Wow.
It's a huge amount. I mean, these are like when you start diving into the research on these certain nutraceuticals, I mean, it's just amazing the benefits. So when you combine them all together, they're pretty powerful. Hemp seeds, that's another one. I don't know if you hear about hemp seeds. And I should also mention the CBD, which I do too. I think that it's a hemp derived.
Yeah.
That has been very beneficial.
Yes, this community talks a lot about CBD oil. And it seems to just be wonderful for so many things.
Yes, that was something that I was very closed-minded to for a long time. Probably because I grew up in the 80s and it was like,
that was a bad thing.
That was a bad thing. And the whole what was this? This is your brain on drugs. And
yes, the egg. Yes.
And the only drug I could think of really was marijuana. Like this must be what you're frying your brain, So I remember when we were on the Montel show when our first book came out in 2005, and he has MS. He's been managing it amazingly, and he does take medicine. I don't think he likes to say what he takes, but anyway, he takes the medicine, but he also is really into the whole nutrition, whole food, fitness, everything, supplements. He takes a lot of supplements. And I remember he was on the show and he held our book up and he held it up and he said, everybody needs a copy of this book. And it went to #1 on Amazon, which was huge. Fun. But then he said, he's like, I do everything in this book and I totally, support it. But in addition, I also take marijuana. And this was before marijuana was even legal. And my husband and I were just sitting there like, wow, we don't know. I didn't even know what to say because I was so dumbfounded.
Yeah.
And you would have thought I would go home and research it after that. But instead I just thought, well, that's because he has symptoms, because he was open about the fact that he still did have symptoms. And so I thought, well, that's just because and then I thought, well, if I ever have symptoms and need it, of course I'll take it.
Right.
But then I just blocked it out of my mind for years, really for years and years, even when it was becoming a thing, even when medical marijuana was a thing in Florida. And even when I started hearing about it from MS, I still wasn't, I just wasn't researching it. And only when I took my dad, who's 93, he was 50 when he was born. Yeah. And I took him, he had a stroke. And so I took him to the neurologist. No, this was not the neurologist. This was the medical marijuana doctor, because we had heard that for strokes, it could help, that medical marijuana could help stroke patients, which that was so foreign to me also. So I took him to the doctor because I knew he had some cognitive issues after the stroke. And I was really nervous that marijuana was going to exacerbate the cognitive issues. So I'm sitting in the office with the lady and I just said, are you sure this isn't going to cause him additional cognitive dysfunction? And she said, no, it's actually neuroprotective. And I thought, that was the first time I'd heard that word. And I said, neuroprotective. So I said, does that mean, because she did not know I had MS. And I said, is that the reason that they recommend it for MS patients? And she goes, oh yes, everyone who has MS should be on it for, to manage, just for controlling the symptoms and just for managing the disease and slowing the progression. And so from there, I started doing my research, and then I went back and got my card and started it. And I thought I felt good before. I didn't even know how much better I could feel, because finally I started sleeping. It must have not been getting deep sleep, because I would need sometimes like 9 or 10 hours for years and years and years. As long as I got 9 or 10 hours, I was fine, but I needed that much sleep. And then as soon as I started taking the medical marijuana, I was sleeping like 8 hours a night and waking up, sleeping 8 hours and waking up feeling refreshed, which I think the sleep was the number one thing and then of course when I take the CBD in the day, I feel like that definitely helps with anxiety.
Yeah, definitely. Yep. That's what we hear. Yeah. Well, that is fantastic. This has been an absolutely fascinating conversation, Ivy. I can't thank you enough for sharing your knowledge and experience with the FUMS community. I know you have a special gift for our listeners today. And we were talking about it before we went live today. So we've put together this contest where you can win the cookbook, Clean Cuisine, and a DVD. If you will go to both the Clean Cuisine and the FUMS Facebook pages, like them, and leave a comment about having heard this podcast episode on each of the pages. And we will be drawing a random name and announce on both platforms on Tuesday, September 3rd, which is the day after the Labor Day weekend. And again, you get to win a free cookbook and DVD of the Clean Cuisine. So I'm very excited about that. Thank you very much for giving that to us. I think that's really cool. I get to spread that with everybody. So thank you for that. That's a wonderful gift. If people want to learn more about you and your books and your program, where do they find you?
Oh, if you go to cleancuisine.com, and then there's links to all the social media channels from the website, but cleancuisine.com is the home base.
Excellent. And as always, everybody, remember, I take the notes for you. You don't need to be trying to write anything down while you're listening. That will all be in the show notes as well, how to find Ivy. So fantastic. Thanks again, Ivy. We here in the FUMS Nation speak to this stupid disease as it deserves, and we tell it FUMS every day. If you would please raise your middle finger in salute to MS and say it with me. Are you ready?
Yes.
1, 2, 3.
FUMS.
All right. Thank you so much. That was perfect. Appreciate it, Ivy. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate you listening to the FUMS Podcast Show. Be sure to subscribe to it so you won't miss an episode. You can do that right on the website at FUMSnow.com. While you're there, sign up for the free email list so you'll be among the first to know of any new findings in MS research, new therapies and products, as well as any blog posts and podcast episodes I release. Want to chat with others in the FUMS community? Join us on Facebook at FUMS Now. Thanks again, and don't forget to talk to the stupid disease as it deserves. Tell it FUMS every day.